Hello there and welcome to my Arty Corner on YouTube. My name's Angela Porter, and amongst other things I'm an artist, and I'm particularly well known for adult colouring books, but having been a teacher for nearly 30 years in my life, still like teaching, as it were, or encouraging people and explaining how you can do things, show and describe and give you some ideas and confidence and ways of building your self-esteem up as an artist and that creativity, so that you feel like you can try things out for yourself and see what happens. It's like giving you permission to experiment, which is a good thing because I used to be a science teacher and I did teach some art as well. So there we go. So thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to everybody who's subscribed. New subscribers who I haven't thanked, thank you very much as well. And it shows that I'm doing something that is of value to you. So thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed, please click the button. It doesn't cost you a penny. All it does is let YouTube know that you enjoy what I am doing. In front of you can see my drawing board. It's completed now. I've actually varnished it and it is still a little bit sticky, but nothing seems to be sticking drastically to it. It feels sticky to my hands, but paper, yeah, there's some stick there, so perhaps I might not use it. I might actually, let me swap it today because it needs a bit more drying and it needs a bit of warmth, I think, because I left it in a cool room in the house. So let me just do that, swap them over, pop that out the way, and I'll go back to the old school mat and just adjust this slightly. There we go, because you can't have things too much on a wonk when it comes to that. It annoys me. So yesterday in my last video, I had a look at 3 tangle patterns, all deconstructed by Zentangle, that to me felt like they had a very similar kind of shapes in the way they're constructed. I don't know if that made any sense to you, but it does in my head. So this is drawings. So a lovely, it's quite fengally as well, but there was something about the way I was drawing the shapes in the, which I've lost, I've put it somewhere safe, the Aquafleur in the video before that made me think of this. So I've completed that one with all shading. Oh, I'm not even under the camera, there you go. With all the shading and everything else. And then I also had a look at Pepper. Now this one I really like. There's a lot of glittery goodness on it. And part of me thinks I could have done without the graphite. I could have used something that was a bit more controllable than that. I had to go back and ink over the black areas in places because the white charcoal dulled them down quite a bit. But I've added a few dots of the glitter inside and outside of the actual pepper shape, and I'm actually quite pleased with that. I think that one might be one of my favourites so far. This one was the Aquafleur I did at the beginning of yesterday's video, and yeah, you can see what's there, can't you? And I actually used inktense pencils to add colour and shading. So I used a charcoal grey one for these parts. Here I used red oxide. So I love that sort of like rusty redness colour. And around the outside I used a brown micron, it was an 05, to add these leafy bits. But I've still got some, I don't know if you can see, yeah, there we are, glittery dots around the outside. I used the same pen that I used in the pepper. But can you see that some of these are really shiny? I used a clear glaze pen to go over them because I wanted the colour to stand out. I wanted something that was a bit different here. So instead of using darkness, but it's only when it catches the light in the right way do you notice it. And it doesn't dull the colour at all, as you can see when I move it out the way. In fact, if anything, it makes the colour that little bit brighter. So that was a nice touch. The clear glaze pens, and they are clear, they are fantastic for adding that, and they're very precise. And once they dry, they are waterproof, they stay where they are. I made the mistake of trying to go over some of the sections though, and it will pick the sections up. But, you know, that's life. So, do I use, I've got grey here, I love this grey, but perhaps I'll try this. This is one of the sort of like peachy colours of these. I'm going to move my camera just a bit closer to me because this is too far away for me to comfortably draw on. Nope, I forgot to get my pens. Oh, God, and my glasses. It's Sunday morning here. It's the 18th of September. I woke up thinking it was Monday, which is a good thing I checked because I have things I have to do. So I've got an 03. I'm going to dig out, I want a pencil. Do I want to dig out anything else? I've got an 01 here somewhere. I'm sure I've got an 01. That one I think is the newer 03, I hope. I know I've got an 01, it's finding it in my pencil case. This pencil case is rather stuffed with pens. I could actually use my fountain pens, but perhaps not yet. Okay, so today I thought I'd rather like to draw mushrooms. It's that time of year, it's autumn time, and walking in the woods, not that I'd walk in woods alone, because I'm far too skittish on my own. I don't find it relaxing at all. I need to go somewhere where I feel safe to walk, because I'm so nervy still around people. Well, I've always been nervy around people. But I thought that mushrooms might actually be a grand idea for this, to be honest. Right, I just need to adjust. Oh, you could tell, can't you? I haven't had enough to drink yet today. That's a bit better. There we go. I can see what I'm doing now. But I love mushrooms, but I do want something for them to grow out of. I could have them just growing from the bottom of the page, but that wouldn't be much fun. So let me think about how we can create a border here. And I want something that will look interesting and will give something for these to grow out of. So I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some leafy or foliage, or perhaps reminiscent of perhaps lichen or something like that. This wasn't the best 03, but it'll do. So what I'm doing here is I'm giving them like 3 little bumps at the top. They do look a bit like sort of cartoon hands, but we'll sort that out at some point, I'm sure. And I'm going to have the last one on this side very drunk, bent over, as it were. And where these little gaps between them are, I'm just going to fill it in with black, because that just makes some kind of sense to me there. So, who says you have to have grass that is all grass shaped? You don't. This is my little garden of mushrooms, and I do love mushrooms, fungi. I always have done. I really enjoy eating them, though I'd never pick them from the wild because I don't know enough about them, and I'm particularly finicky about mushrooms. I really dislike the ones you find in Chinese food. I don't enjoy the flavour or the texture or the sliminess that they seem to acquire. And I'm a bit wary of mushrooms that aren't the white ones or chestnut ones that you find in supermarkets. So I'm a bit of an odd bod that way. Or perhaps not odd, perhaps other people are exactly the same. That one looks almost like a heart, so I'm just going to put the base of one of those in there. Though I've got nothing averse to hearts yet. That's for sure. Oh, this one's going to go in a weird way. It's got much more of a stem. There we go. I'm having fun here, if nothing else. I really haven't woken up, even though I've been awake for well over an hour now. It is one of those days. You can tell, can't you? I'm confused enough thinking it was Monday and discovering it's only Sunday. So there we go. So I'm just going to just connect these places at the bottom where the gaps are between them, and quickly I'll add some black in there. I wreck pens at a fast rate of knots. Sorry, I think you're likely to get my weird mind that just grasshoppers over things, and what flits through my head may come out of my mouth today. Oh, it'll be fine. I filter things, but it's these random thoughts of, gosh, fountain pen would be better because it's harder to wreck. There we go, but it'll be fine. So I've got my frilly, funny, weird kind of forest floor here. And I could have a few leaves sticking out here. I could have made it of leaves, like leaves that fall in the autumn. That would be nice because the colours would be glorious on this. But then I'm likely to do these in a colour that will go with the background. Got a lot more black on one side than the other. But that's okay because I can do some adjustments here to create some extra spaces, because that's fine. We can do that. So something like that would work. That helps a bit. And perhaps here, that little bit extra, and perhaps here. And here. Not that it matters too much if it's not balanced. But you can adjust it until you feel it. It's just got that feeling that things belong together. Right, I'm just going to have a drink of my mocha, because that may help. It may. I'm not going to guarantee it. Okay, mushrooms. I love mushrooms, and I often start from the top of them and work my way down. So my first one, though, I'm going to start with the stem. So my stem is going to go in and it's going to get thicker that way. So this is the top, which is where the cap is going to sit. So we're going to see that cap underneath the mushroom cap. So we're going to have to draw a shape that suggests that the mushroom cap is tilted. So we've got all of this area here is where the gills would be. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to give this a bit of a border. Now I'm drawing my lines very smoothly and evenly, but to be honest with you, a bit of wrinkle in them would look like there's a texture on that edge, like it's frilly. So I may draw another one like that. So at the top, I've just finished it off with a curve. It's a bit flatter there than a curve. You can make it as pointy as you like, as flat as you like, as domed as you like. It will always work because mushrooms are wonderful things. And then I'm going to pop the gills in at the bottom because they are called gills. So I'm starting, oops, don't worry if it goes outside the line because I'm going to thicken these lines in some way anyway, as if they're going towards a central point here. And I'm having them bending outwards slightly because that suggests that what's under here isn't curving inwards, it's curving outwards. So it's quite a plumptuous little mushroom. Well, actually it's quite a big mushroom in the grand scheme of things here. And the trick is not to be too precious about things because they will always work out. Now, I quite like the top as it is, and we could leave it just like that and add some colour to it, which is fun. But I think I might like to add some stripes to it. So I'm going to imagine a point again. If this top dips down, well, it doesn't matter too much, but I'm sort of imagining where these lines would radiate out from, and then I can have a stripy mushroom top. The other thing I like to do, and I'm going to use my O1 pen for this, is I like to add some lines to suggest shadow and texture on these. So I'm using the O1 and I'm basically adding quite broken lines, and sometimes those lines are quite long and other times not, but it just adds that little hint of shadow. This is going to be instead of using charcoal, and I'm going to put some of these lines at the base of the larger sections here of this, you know, the gills, the bigger area, like so, just to add some shadow there. And I'm also going to add just a few hints and so on at the edge. Not so much in places, but just adding these little lines, and I am curving them to match the curvature of the lines I've already drawn there. But it just adds volume already, and I'm also going to pop some coming from the top. And you know me, I tend to think that the greatest amount of shadow needs to be to the left and the bottom, because that's the way I always think of it if I'm using a light source. So I'm definitely going to get a few more lines in on that side. And there we go. So we've got one mushroom that looks vaguely quite nice. Okay, so let's add another mushroom here. So I'm going to add one here, and I'm going to start with the top. I'm going to make it nice and flat, and so the bottom bends down a little bit, the top one bends up quite a bit. And then from the centre-ish of this, I'm drawing two little lines coming out, and then I'm going to join them with an irregular frilliness. And then I'm going to imagine that this point here will bend inwards a little bit, and here will bend in and then out. So we're giving that a little bit of a skirt. And for this one, I am going to pop in some lines, like so. So back to the pen I'm using to add the shadow, the O1. So the same kind of thing, but I am adding shadow all the way underneath that frilly bit. And on this side I'm going to add lines which are quite broken. Sometimes they're a bit straighter than others, but they just give that hint of shadow, and the way that you move them also helps to accent or suggest that curvature of the cap. The cap is not flat, that it is bending away that little bit. So two cute little mushrooms. I do like these ones that have got nice flat, or like this. So I am just going to go to the left of each of these lines and just thicken them up a little bit into the bottom. With these lines as well. And I'm going to do the same here, where it's the left and the bottom. Inside this, underneath of the cap, I'm going to actually thicken the lines on the right, to the top and the right as well. Because that just feels then that this forms that lip, and then to the left. And just thickening those lines just gives that little bit more dimension, than we had. Okay, so next one. And there's nothing to say, what size? Well, I've got the O1, let's go with the O3, to say we can't have a collection of the same kinds of ones sort of all together. So I'm going to add another one of these behind the other. And because I've decided how I want to thicken the lines as I draw this, I'm going to do this as I go along. Now, I might get a little bit of the frilliness here, but not much. I can still add that line in. I'm just going to add some shadows here. But probably don't need to do them in these lines because I can get that shadowing with the by using more intense colour or shading. But this is kind of a test to see. Perhaps a little bit just on the edge. And of course there would be shadow here where this overlaps, so I want to make sure I pop some of that in. And perhaps a third one here that would be a little one, a baby one, that just sticks behind here. So we will have that frilliness and this kind of thing going on here just to get it all started. There we go. So even clusters of the same kind of mushroom will work quite nicely on in this kind of composition. I realised I need to go back and at some point and add some shadowy details like this to the fronds at the bottom. You know, it's going to be, for me it's always left and bottom to these, just to give them some dimension. I don't think I'll put any of the line shading in them though. I think I'll keep these pretty simple. I'm not doing a very good job. This should have, sure the other pen is the better one. But this will work. It'll do its job. That's all that matters. It'll do its job. It'll be good enough. And it also has the added bonus of being able to tidy up areas where perhaps I've overshot with pen, or perhaps not made quite as neat a line as I'd like, because nobody knows what was meant or wasn't meant here, as it's the overall effect and nothing ever stands out as being weird unless it's just that one thing that's a bit off, as it were. Like this one is definitely off, but it's okay. I'm creating a very thick black line there, so that one's going to be a bit of a peculiar one, but it'll be fine. There we go. So that's added some stuff to that. Okay, so how about, I've got one of those. I haven't got any pointy topped mushrooms, so let's do a pointy topped one. So my line starts straight and then it starts to curve out. It's going up and over and it's going out this way. So it's bending in and then it's bulging out just a little bit, I suppose. And the bottom of this I am going to make uneven. And I am going to do the same kind of idea of to the left and bottom on the cap. And then we're going to have a stalk coming out here. And then I think what we'll do with this one is I'm going to put a pattern of circles in here, or ovals rather. Stretched orbs if you prefer Zentangle terms. They're getting slightly bigger each time we go down a row, and there's one there that's halfway round, and that will be fun to actually add in colour to, but it's also going to be fun to add shading, because I'm going to add shade inside these circles from the top. By doing this, it will give them the impression or the suggestion that perhaps these are hollows in the cap of the mushroom. And I'm going to put just a few shading lines and dots at the bottom here. Just to add some dimension. I'm not going to try and do it on the side because I've got all of those mushrooms there. So we've got that one. Okay, so a different kind of one that perhaps could be this kind of shape, and I am going to give this one a couple of cracks in it. And even though this looks like it should go out there, I think I would bring it down and round so it's hiding behind there, which will be fine. So remember, to the left, bottom of each shape. And here we've got from the top, and this one's going to have a very thin, a silly thin stem, which will bend its way down here, I think. There we go. So again, I'm just going to pop some lines in, but I'm also going to make sure I pop lines in where there's shadowing. Right, on the top of this one though, I'm going to do something that's a little bit different. I'm adding a section where it looks like something is melted on it. Melting ice cream. Or whatever mushrooms have on the top of them. Like so. I think that would be quite nice. And perhaps in the bottom I will pop, let me use the thicker pen, a sprinkling of dots, just to give the impression that we've got something over, like something's on the top of what's underneath, if that makes any sense. And for these ones, I'm going to pop the shadows on these at the bottom. Like so. Okay, so whatever's head scratching here. Okay, so I'm drawing a kind of teardrop shape, but instead of a point at the top, I've made it quite rounded. And again, I'm going to have the stem coming out here. These are quite nice to do. I love the way they can interlace, where they can overlap and we get layers into this. And for this one, I'm going to use crescent moon, I suppose it is, without the dark bit at the bottom at the moment, to fill this up. Now, I'm not being consistent in the size of these because I want some variation, some variety here. But you do as you wish. If you want things to be very equally in size, carry on. This will be your drawing, not, mine. I'm giving you some suggestions as to what you could do, not what you absolutely have to do. It may be that you'd go, well, I'm not sure about that in that one, but I'd rather like it in one of the round ones. Fine, carry on. It's not a problem. I think the hardest thing when it comes to being creative and you don't have the confidence in yourself is to have that permission to just try something and see what happens. The worst that happens is you've wasted a few minutes of time, or I won't say wasted, because it's never a waste. You've used a few minutes of time, a little bit of ink and a tiny piece of paper, and you don't like what you've done, but you've tried it, you've seen what happens, and you've learnt, well, I won't do that again. Unless you're like me, where I continually do the same things and go, why did I do that? I remember afterwards that it was something I wasn't going to do again. My notes to self about sticking to fairly simple, limited colour palettes or even monochrome colour schemes. Do I pay any attention to them? No. And afterwards I go, why did I do that? There. It looks a bit flatter than the others, but that's where the use of colour and shading will come in. And what others? So how about if we draw a mushroom almost as if we're looking at it from the top? So I'm going to draw one behind here, but I'm going to put the centre of it somewhere up here. And I'm going to draw a little circle there to suggest there's a dimple there. Now, this is where the stem is going to come from, so we're going to have another stem that is going to be behind others. So let me just fill that in. The other thing I didn't do to this one was to add some shadows to this stem, where the cap is, down one side, but also where we've got some overlapping taking place. And I'll do the same here while I think about it. I actually wanted to put a frill or a ring round the stem of this one, but it's just not going to happen, is it, today? And then down the bottom we can have quite a few areas of shading because there's quite a lot of mushrooms behind. Okay, so here is where I want to make this appear that it is curving. So I'm going to start over here and I'm creating almost a hill, and I am going to go around this, bearing in mind that when we get to the top these will start to switch from place to place. So over here this one would go this way, and perhaps we'll have one in the middle. Perhaps I'll put one there. And I'm just going to thicken that line there. And then suddenly we have a mushroom cap that has got a dimple in it. So with this, I'm just flicking my pen with this one. So when you flick your pen, you don't press down very dark or very deeply on your pen. The pen naturally fades to a point. So I'll have some tiny little ones around the edge at the top, perhaps. Definitely have some there and there because of the shadow, and here too because we're in shadow. But we've got one that's got a dimple in it. So I'm quite happy with this as it is at the moment. I can always add more in, but we've got a few going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach for a different pencil case. And I'm going to get my, oh, as well as opening the curtain fully, I've got my inktense pencils here because I've discovered this paper, although it's not designed for watercolours, it actually works quite nicely. So let's have a look. What colours do I have in here? I've got crimson. So I'm going to add crimson to alternate sections of this because crimson is lovely. It's one of my favourite colours here. And I'm also going to put some crimson right at the base. Now, my problem here is that this ink takes a little bit of time to dry on this paper. So we might get some black ink moving. This is a Kuretake Zig water brush. I've always liked these ones actually. But my old ones were worn and tired, and my the Faber-Castell ones, they don't really have a very fine point, whereas these do. So just a tiny amount of that ink has worked wonders there. Okay, I want a different colour. So let's go for sienna gold, because I'm going to try to pick colours that will work nicely with the background. Neutrals always will. But for colours, I'm going to go for oranges and yellows and reds. So it's going to be quite an autumnal feel to this. Some purples would work perhaps. I've got carmine pink here. I don't want that one yet. I want something for these gills, and I want something that will be brownish. I think that one might do. This one is baked earth. Actually, if I can find sepia, that would be better. That's bark. That might work if I can't find sepia quickly. This is what happens when I don't think about what I'm going to do in advance. There we are, sepia. Sepia ink is the ink that you get from squid, if I remember rightly. This one isn't from squid, but it's the colour of, so it's a browny black, and I think that'll work nicely here. So I'm putting that in the larger sections of these gills, again towards the centre and a little bit around the edge. I could do with sharpening these pencils a tad. And then, yeah, can you see it's a nice browny black colour, and that'll work nicely because where I'm leaving plenty of the colour, it's remaining dark. Where I'm letting it wash out, it's going that little bit lighter. I do love inktense pencils. I do tend to flop around between alcohol markers and inktense. They're both permanent. They both have a lovely vibrancy of colour. But the advantage of me using inktense pencils here is that I've got such small spaces in my drawing that I'd find it really hard to use alcohol markers, even ones with a brush tip, because I do have ones that have got a brush tip. I've got a set of Copic Chows here. But even then, I find it incredibly difficult to get very fine lines because I'm so heavy-handed. But with inktense and a fine paintbrush, and I do love these water brushes, it avoids faffing around with bottles of water. And I'm not a fan of faffing around with bottles of water. Okay, I do want something, I do want a purpley colour. Okay, come on. I have got here, I've got red violet for my stem. Just a hint to give the And I'll use that colour on all of the stems, so I'm being pretty consistent in how I approach these. Can't really get that creamy brown, but I can do something like this. And of course, because they're imaginary, I can have them any colour I like, really. And what I'm going to do with these here, I think I'm going to pick up with the sienna gold that I used on the, I was going to say the roof of the mushroom, but I guess that'll work if it's a mushroom house. Just some of the sienna gold here, just to add some colour to these sections. Which will help to disguise where I haven't done such a good job of blending the colour out, because I'm not exactly brilliant at this. And around the edge, I'm going to go back to that crimson. We've got a helicopter outside, so I don't know what's going on. It's going to be police or air ambulance. I doubt it's the air ambulance. You hardly see them around here. Oh, I can hear sirens, so something's afoot. What that something is, I don't know. I may find out, I may not. So that's my first mushroom. Okay, for these at the bottom, I want to use some purple, I think. Now, did I put any purple in my stash of pencils for... Yes, I did. I've got purple, I've got a mauve here. And so I'm going to use mauve towards the base. I'm not going to do them all, I'm just going to try some things out here. I'm going to use the carmine towards the centre. So I'm going to get a mixing of these colours, hopefully, in between. And then I think I'll pop that sienna gold at the top. And I'm so grateful that I think Inktense is available. Yeah, that helicopter's really circling round. Inktense pencils are available open stock, because sienna gold I seem to get through an awful lot. I love the colour. It is a yellow, but it's got that lovely warmth of orange with it. And I just really, 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 really love this. So I'm just trying these to see what happens. I'm started with the bottom with the first one, but on these ones I'm actually starting with the lightest colour. And when you see me move my brush and hand away, it's because I am wiping the tip of the brush off on the back of my hand, because I forgot to get some tissue or paper towel to do that on. Or a rag. Back of my hand works just fine though. And it washes off. It dries permanent on paper but doesn't on skin, as far as I know. So I've got those there. That actually looks, I really like that. So I'm not going to do them all. I'm so tempted to. I'm not going to. I'm going to find that mauve, red, oh, the red violet again, which is here. And I'm going to use that on all my stems. So I'm going to do those all in one go. Putting plenty of the colour where there's shadow. Though it doesn't mean I can't come back with another colour once this has dried. So a hint of sepia might work nicely, just to dull the colour down a bit if I think it's a bit on the garish side for a mushroom. I'm sticking to where the shadows are and also to the left, though I am putting a tiny bit towards the right because that edge would be in shadow. Oh, and here, this one I haven't done a very good job of putting some in. On that side, that side. That should be okay, so I can quickly work these in. So I love these water brushes. Less likely for me to knock over something like a jar of water, spill it and make a mess. Now, I'm not too worried if I end up with an area that's too dark in colour, because once I've wet this I can't get it up from this paper. It's not watercolour paper. It actually grabs the colour really well, which doesn't mean it's necessarily a good thing that it grabs the colour, by the way. Just, it is what it is. It's not meant for wet media, but you know, I'm a rebel, and most papers will take a little bit of moisture, but you can't overwork them. And as I'm not a watercolourist and I try not to overwork things anyway, because if I overwork something it ends up a right mess. But here this will work quite nicely, I think. And I quite like the consistency and the colour of these, to be honest, because it says, oh, we're all the same kind of thing. So essentially I'm working with a limited colour palette is basically what I'm trying to say. And that is sort of suggested by the backgrounds. That actually works quite nicely. I quite like that. They are fun. Okay, I like the purple. I've seen that the purple will work quite nicely on here, so I think I'm going to add some purple stripes here. And I am putting the purple to both the left and the right, but a little bit less on the right, because it's the purple that's, it's the left that's going to be in full light, and the right is just going to have that hint of shadow. So the trick here is to work with a tiny bit of colour into the lightest area, and then move back into the darkest area just to activate that colour. And the colour does change when you activate it. You can use these just as colouring pencils, but the colours aren't as vibrant. There we go, you can see there. These are lovely. Now I'm using these, but you could use any colouring medium you like, or just charcoal and white charcoal and graphite, so you get a completely monochrome drawing. So I'm going to use the sienna gold again. It's yellow, yellowy orange and purple are complementary colours-ish. They're almost opposite one another on the colour wheels. They will actually make each other look a lot more vibrant. And I do like complementary colours together in things. They really pick that colour up. Here you can see the black is where the ink from the pen hasn't dried enough. But it is what it is. And I'm just having fun this morning doing this with you. And it is morning for me. What time is it now? It's got to be, oh, it's 9:30. So, yeah, 50 minutes. And I spent most probably 5 minutes or so of that just blathering. Yeah, so the black picked up has given that a kind of metallic feel. I'm happy with that. Okie doke, so this one, oh, you know, it's going to be the sienna gold here, isn't it? There's definitely something afoot. There's more sirens going off here. Sunday morning, for goodness sakes. I'm sure if it's something absolutely disastrous, it'll be in the news. It could just be a missing person. You're trying to find a vulnerable person. So, The helicopter's definitely circling around, so there we are. So that looks quite fun. And somewhere in here, hopefully, I have got here a burnt orange. So I'm going to, geez, that's close. That is definitely right over top. So I'm putting burnt orange in here. I've just noticed that I've missed the little bits of shadow there and there in those little spots. That's a recipe for disaster if I ever created one myself. The lovely thing about this is that if you wanted to, you could use mushrooms from nature, the colours of mushrooms in nature, but you'd be surprised at the range of colours that mushrooms and fungi of all kinds are. Because strictly speaking, we should call them fungi rather than mushrooms. I don't know if the microphone's picking that up. That is dead low. And they're circling round, so they're looking for somebody, I think. So, no doubt social media and the news will be awash with what's going on at some point. Some theory, some truth. Some rumours, some truth. There we go. So I've got a lighter orange and a darker orange. That's quite fun. I'm going to leave that dry before I do anything to the heads. I've got red oxide, but I don't want to use my red oxide if I can help it. I've got an iron blue here. Now then, I'm not sure how this colour is going to work on the brown, or on this peachy colour. So I'm going to have a look and see what colours it blends to. Actually, that's not too bad. And let me have a look at another colour that I might quite like to use. I've got a green aquamarine here, which could be nice. And they're not too bad on this. They create strange colours, but I think they'd be a nice change from the other colours in a way. Or shall I? No. No, let me stay true to what I was going to do and keep a limited colour palette. So here, I've gone back to the carmine. Which is a pinky red. And I'm missing a section for this, so I think I'll just fill this one in here as if we've got a big section over here. Nobody will know the difference, because perhaps that one splits. So I want the darkest areas at the top and the bottom and where there are shadows. So let's have a look and see where we can get that. A nice highlight in between the two darker areas. Still want a gradation of colour. This is beautiful on this peachy colour. It gives such a lovely highlight. The peach works really nicely with this colour. I'm glad I bought a book of this card. And it is card designed for drawing on. Because it's all pastel colours. I don't want brights. But I can see what colours are lovely. It's like this one here, which is the grey green or greeny grey. That one I really love. So I know you can buy these as individual packs of colour, which is fantastic. Now I've already used the sienna gold with one there. So I think I'm going to look for a different colour. Perhaps I'll use the red violet here for this as well. Bearing in mind that I do want this where there's going to be plenty of shadows, perhaps not so much on the edges there, because I think they would be catching the light because they're quite high up. But let's have a look and see how this works. And this colour works nicely. It's because it's a reddish colour. It'll work nicely with a peachy colour. So, just want to try and move some of that colour away and leave a better highlights than I've got, but again, it'll be fine. So though it's Sunday, there's some things I want to get done today. Got some things I need to look up and research about for my own personal interest. One of them is something called imposter syndrome, which I'm aware of, and I know that my EMDR therapist said that I'm a classic example of this syndrome, and it's where you believe that you're faking it and that one day somebody will find out that you're faking it, and it can become paralysing and fear-inducing, amongst other things. And it means that you end up not doing anything for fear of being found out as a fraud. It's awful. It really, really is. Right, I've got carmine pink here. Not carmine, but carmine pink. And I think I'm going to use that for this one. And I am going to put plenty of colour on this. I'm using the same colour-ish, but I think I'm going to put some of that sienna gold on and mix the two in, you know, towards the middle perhaps. So I've got carmine pink, and I may just put some of the carmine around the edge just to give that darker colour. And this is one of those examples where I want to start where the colour is lightest. This is picking up the pigment from the pens I used. So they could have been left to dry for a day or two. I could have taken a heat tool to them, but I think it'll work to my advantage to a degree, because they'll end up looking a lot more like they are quite metallic in colour, and I can always come back and add some more colour to these by picking the colour up from the tip of the pencil, which is what I'm likely to do with this one, to get some more of this sienna gold in places. The problem with picking up too much is it does become a little bit on the opaque rather than transparent side. It becomes more translucent. But I think it'll be fine. There we go. Okay, I've got the holes on these to do, and this is where I think I'm going to use, which one? I'm going to use the iron blue, I think. Yeah. I'm going to use the iron blue on these, because blue and orange are complementary colours. Usually a brighter blue than this, but I think this might work. So although I'm going outside of my boundaries here in terms of colours I'm using, not sticking to that limited number, but I think a little pop of colour like that every now and again is very useful. This one will need me going over the black bits with black. Sometimes it might have served me better if I'd done that one in colour first and then added the patterns on the top. So that is something that we, to consider going forward. Okay, this one here, I don't have any of the crimson close to it, so I'm going to add crimson around the edge. And again, I think I might do a blend of colours perhaps on the cap of this, or perhaps not. I'm going to put some down the side, plenty along this bottom edge, because we really do want this bottom edge to be nice and dark. And then it's just a case of bringing this into the area first where I want the highlight, just to add that hint of colour. You can See how I'm just picking the tiniest amount of colour up from the edges of these and moving it around, and then I'm going to activate the rest of this here. Again, if I feel I need more colour along the edge, if I need to darken this up, I can always either add more pencil and then wash it out, or just pick the colour up from the tip of the pencil and wash it in, as it were, which is likely to be my preferred choice for this. So I am just going along and activating this. Anything that goes into these little holes here, I'm not going to worry about too much, because I'm going to find that sepia. Got the sepia ink, and I'm going to actually use the sepia ink there to add the holes in. So I'm putting plenty of sepia towards the top, and then I'm going to blend that down so we've got a lot of shadow at the top and not so much elsewhere. So we literally have holes in the mushroom. Well, divots at least. And again, if I don't think I've got enough colour, or I need a bit more darkness at the top, I can always add more from the pencil. I do love these water brushes. I'm going to say it again and again. I find that the water control from them is amazing. In others, when you recharge the little, it's like a little sponge reservoir at the bottom, and if the water isn't automatically charging it up, you need to give a little squeeze. You don't end up with tons dribbling out. So that's looking pretty cool. Okay, so I want the mauve. I'm going to finish these. So I'm going to go along and pop all the mauve in. Then, if I remember rightly, it was carmine, and then the sienna gold, and then I can just quickly blend these in. It doesn't take long. Sometimes you think, oh gosh, is this going to take forever? Well, it would take a lot longer if I didn't go through them and do everything one step at a time, as it were, or one colour at a time. So I've got that. Here's my carmine. Like so. And I'm overlapping them this time because I've learnt from the first couple that might work better for me in terms of blending the colours together. But I'm not sure whether I'll overlap the sienna gold here. We'll see. And here's my sienna gold, so let's go back. Put some of that at the top. I'm not being fussy about where I'm putting it because the water will move it around. And that's one of the lovely things about using these. Okay, here we go. Let's start. Sienna gold into the carmine, and then into the other one. Sienna gold blending into the carmine, and the carmine down to the whatever colour that was. Mauve, is it? I don't know, forgotten already. So these might have a bit more colour in them than the first couple, but you know, I can adjust that, or I can just go, okay, that's how they grow. Because no two will ever be the same. So don't worry about getting things perfect. I'm learning not to be a perfectionist. Well, less of a perfectionist, less getting frustrated if something isn't perfect, and just going for that kind of effect. I think that's why watercolour frustrates me so much, because it does tend to have a mind of its own. You just can't control it completely. And anything that's water-based is pretty much the same, but these seem to work quite nicely for me. And I like the fact that they become permanent once they've dried. For some reason that pleases me with these, that I've got a line there, so I'll just blend that one out. I carried a bit of the colour up to the gold here, but it's worked its way out and all will be fine and well here. If anything, I'm going to have to go back to cleaning that off and just blending that line out. Very autumnal feeling almost, isn't it? But, you know, that was my aim, really. I think in the autumn the woods are alive with mushrooms, apparently. I'm sure they are at different times of the year. I'm sure there must be ones that fruit at different times of the year. I think that's the technical term for mushrooms growing, they fruit. I could be wrong. Well, they're the fruiting bodies of the fungi. I think I'm right in that. It's been a long time since I read much about fungi. I do have a book on my Kindle to read, which is all about entangled fungi and how important fungi are to humanity, really. Okie dokes. So the last thing I want to do to this lot is to use a white gel pen. Got a jelly roll. Oh, I've got a souffle pen. Souffle hasn't got much ink in it. Let's see if I can get it to work. The souffle is very opaque. It takes a little while to dry, but it's also very opaque in colour, and once it's dried it tends to leave a little raised lump as well. You can, I don't know if you can see the little dots there, I doubt it because I've just dried them with my finger so I don't make a mess anywhere. But I am just going to pop some dots of the souffle in the highlighted areas of the mushroom caps. So I'll have a dense concentration of them and I'll just let them fade out to either side just to give, rather than concentrating them in one area, I'm going to put a few on the stems where I want that light to be, or where there is a light area to be, and to break up any darker areas. This one's interesting because I'm not quite sure where I want to put that. You don't have to put them on all of them, and you can use different colours or metallics if you wish. I'm going to put a couple through here. Definitely need to get some more of the white souffle pens. I'm sure I've got some somewhere, but it's where I pop them safe. I think I know. Don't be too regimented with them because you'll end up with something that looks very regimented, as it were. Be a bit random. And especially on these where the highlights are sort of like somewhere in the middle, but you also need to have little white dots fading into elsewhere. So it's about the density of dots, gives you the brightest areas. And if you scatter a dot or two into the darker areas of this, it will look more natural, almost like this has got a sparkle on it. So this one I'm putting some bigger dots in amongst this because this upper part is where I want most of the light to be. But I'm going to put a dot in each of these where I think the highlight to be, just to pick that up, and perhaps a few scattered dots where there's some highlighting going on. And you can see how quickly they're drying, and when they dry they become very opaque and they should be visible. So here I'm just going to add a few dots in the lighter area. Decided what I wanted to do there, and I might actually just put a little dot at the bottom of each of these to suggest there's a little bit of light getting in there that is making these, you know, they're just catching the light at the bottom. For these ones, I think I'm going to look about where they're bent over, or where I think they might have enough light to warrant a bit of some highlights. Like so, perhaps. This is the fun bit. And that is mostly done, I think. The one thing I do want to do is to find my O3 pen. I've got so many things out on the desk here now. Because I am going to put a border in this, but I'm not going to draw it where the pencil line is. I'm actually going to go inside it a little bit, as if everything here is just spilling out. Of this, and then because I'm not drawing it with a ruler, I'm just doing it an ish kind of panel. If it's a bit wobbly and wonky, it's a bit wobbly and wonky. So the little lines, oh, that's well wobbly and wonky. Look at that one. It's well on the wonk, Angela. What were you thinking of? Well, it's done now, isn't it? And I'm going to shave that side off. No, I won't. It's bad. It's bad. I'll be the first to admit that it's bad. It seemed like a good idea, but I really did not keep this to... let's see if we can fix this, perhaps. This may fix it. Bit, does it? Oh, that feels less wonky. It's still a bit wonky, but we'll live with the wonk. How about that? And it just gives that frame, and inside that frame is where I could add some colour and shadow, and I'm looking for a colour that would add some shadow here. I'm just quickly going to use, this is where I mess everything up. You realise this, as soon as I do things like this, as soon as I realise that I've made a right balls up of something, oops, sorry, excuse the French, mess things up, then I tend to carry on making things worse and worse instead of better and better. So I've got some of that lovely orangey colour here, and I am going to just spread this down just to give some shadow at the top, perhaps, or that feeling that there's some lighter light coming from the bottom that's just lightening this up. And we'll just do the same over here. I've got a bit too much water coming through my brush, but it'll be fine. And let this be a lesson to me that in future I do things like, where did I put that one? Where have I put there? Use a ruler to put your guidelines in, Angela. So I'm just picking up some orange-ish here, just to fill some bits in. Perhaps a bit too much, to be honest, but it'll be fine. There's enough here going on. Just that little hint. Actually, that works. Actually, I think that may have worked out okay-ish. You'll have to let me know. Was this a bad idea? Probably. Excuse me. Oh. in between, the darker bits in between. So just to pick those up and where there's some shadowing going on. And that makes it just that little bit more interesting. And I think I may be done with that. I could put something in the border if I ever find a nice gold pen. I'll do that perhaps, or fill it in with black and white. That'd be fun actually, but I'm not going to do that now. What I am going to do is just put my initials in, and I'm going to call that one for now done. I've got this border around here I could do something with as well, and you know that I'm likely to, let's have a look. Because it'd be perfect for having Mukas growing up, and that would actually, I think, help to offset the wobbliness of the line, wouldn't it? As I can do things like that. That would work actually. So I think it's in Zentangle they say there's never a mistake, and there's never anything that you can't correct in some way or another. And I think they're correct in that, in this instance anyway. So we can add things like this in, and suddenly we're disguising the wonkiness, aren't I? So it'll be fine. There we are. Worked it out. So there you are, my autumnal what do you call it, mushrooms. I haven't quite finished this, but oh gosh, it's an hour and 17 minutes. I'm sorry. Gosh. But when I finish it, I'll post a picture of it in the community tab and on my social media as well. So I need to ink over this one actually as well and make sure that one's nicest it can be. So please look after yourselves, take care, and find time to be creative, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now. Bye.